live. Thank you everyone for joining us on another podcast here live on LinkedIn. And I have again our amazing guest, Dr. Caroline, who's going to be talking to you about more subjects, topics to high performers, how they hide stress, and how they're always giving their best. People only see the smiles, the tough decisions, but they don't see the stress behind it and how they're perhaps harming themselves. So she's here to make you feel seen, to make you feel heard, and give you some actionable tips on how to proceed going forward. Dr. Caroline, thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, and that fact that you share it with us every single time.
Thanks for having me. Of course. I love being here.
Thank you. And I know you've been traveling quite a lot, so hopefully you are as well rested as you can be, and hope you have fun here. So we're going to get started, and I thought I'll set the stage by kind of describing some scenarios that a lot of people are going to be very familiar when they hear, and it gives you some context a little bit into the day in the life of a lot of these high performing tech professionals. So here's a version of burnout that doesn't look like falling apart. It's either the product manager who still joins every call with a smile. It looks like the engineer who still ships on time, the founder who still posts wins on LinkedIn, the high performer who still says, I'm good, while their nervous system is quietly begging for help. In tech, burnout often doesn't announce itself with collapse. It hides behind clean dashboards, perfect Slack responses, late night commits, promotions, bonuses, and the fear that if you admit you're struggling, someone will quietly decide you're no longer leadership material. And that's what it makes all of this dangerous. High performers don't always burn out because they're weak. Sometimes they burn out because they're too good at hiding the evidence. So today we have Dr. Caroline with us, who's going to talk about the silent burnout no one wants to admit publicly, the stress you normalize, the perfectionism you call standards, the self-criticism you call motivation, and the moment your body starts keeping score before your career does.
Well, yeah, you said it. I mean, burnout, I think we think of the collapse and the exhaust, but it is doing all of the things. And
Mhm.
I've talked for years with people who work with younger generations. How do we develop grit in our children? But the gritty people usually grow up to be workaholics and they're
Mm.
isolated. They're completely isolated because they're working long hours. They don't there's almost an intimidation factor too. Like other people just don't relate to them in the same
I
sort of
see.
way. And so they're getting isolated in so many different realms and or withdrawing, right? And that just
Mhm,
feels like
mhm.
more exhaustion till the point where their body does just give out. Or I do see
Mhm.
this sort of brownout. It's not complete blackout burnout. It's this brownout where
I see.
functioning still and we're meeting those deadlines. We're still doing our emails at midnight. And we're still doing all the things, but we're just not as productive. And
Mm.
physiologically, we might not be feeling very well as well. But it's usually because of the strengths I would say that we do have as high performers that's kind of
Mhm.
driving that sort of makes it look like they're still doing really well because they've got all of these high skills. And I think the things that help them be successful are the
Mhm.
things that are driving that too. We're pushing through the discomfort. We're never showing that struggle, right? And so then it makes it harder. I mean, we hide it and maybe even from ourselves, right? We kind of
Mhm.
dismiss everything. Yeah, but it'll be better next week. Next week it'll be better. Next month it'll be better. Next year, next decade. We keep pushing that.
Very true. And I think you also mentioned something. It appears that they are performing very high, and which they are. And that's why it might be even harder to realize that they're burning out. A lot of these people who operate with grit, they're operating in such high standards that people around them might not meet their standard. So they think they're doing okay, but in reality, they could be doing even better, is what I'm hearing. Can you unpack that? Because it's rather fascinating.
I think it's not necessarily that they're doing better because I think if they weren't in burnout mode, their cognitive capacity would actually be stronger. They would be able to think more
Mhm,
clearly,
mhm.
probably problem solve better. So I wouldn't necessarily say that they're performing better. We just might not be because they're putting in just the sheer amount of hours and work. that kind
Mm-hmm.
of masks what maybe they might have been able to get away with if they just did a normal day, but
Right.
focused, and those types of things. But I do think like a lot of it does, when we look at silent burnout, it is silent because we can't see it. And it's subtle things that we do, right? It's maybe we're not responding to emails or we're not reaching out to people. Like it's that
Mm-hmm.
slow sort of withdraw. A lot of it is avoidance. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
it is turning to things to numb us out at the end of the day. So I think that there's a lot of those things. I mean, I always say that our body is sort of smarter than our brain. Our body actually tells us, our body picks up so much. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times, I'm looking at things make people feel uncomfortable, but I'm looking at things like bowel movements and
Mm-hmm.
tension in the body. But what we see is just that sort of smoothness. But I do think it really comes physiologically. Maybe we're a little bit more irritable, a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
snappy, or just tunnel vision or ruminating in our head, trying to problem solve. Like there's just constant noise. So
Mm-hmm.
there's lots of different ways that it can sort of show up in that regard.
It makes sense. And I do want to also bring in the topic on perfectionism, which you alluded to in our offline conversations, because I see a lot of these people with a lot of grit. They do a few things, and catch me if I'm going all over the place. So, one
Okay.
is perfectionism on themselves, and they also expect perfectionism on people around them. Automatically, the next thing is judgment. So there is that burnout, there's perfectionism, which is an unrealistic, non sustainable way of operating. Then there's judgment. I see a cascade, a domino effect on lowering outcomes. Because they have grit and they're doing this, they tend to have very good outcomes. But I think that that is not their actual peak. They're burning themselves out to some level of competence, but they're not reaching their true potential, in my opinion. Love for you to kind of eliminate that enigma. And if someone is watching this, a high performer who says, I work on 4 hours of sleep, I do X, Y, and Z, people around me are not operating at my level with that perfectionism, self imposed and imposed on others, what do you want them to slow down and see?
When we look at perfectionism, I mean, I want to separate high standards from perfectionism because I do think
Okay.
they're two
Mm,
different things. And it is
I see.
important for us to have high standards. There's nothing wrong
Mm,
with that. But high standards is about the work. Perfectionism is more about self protection. And I don't think people actually understand that. If things go perfect, then nothing bad can happen. Nobody can judge me. Everybody's going to look at me in positive sort of regard, which is actually quite
mhm,
interesting because the more perfect we are, the less likely people are actually like you're not approachable. And so the cost comes when they make a mistake, they're never learning. We know the most successful CEOs are ones who are looking to make mistakes every single day because they know it's a
mhm,
learning
mhm,
opportunity. Whereas a perfectionist is really shutting themselves off from that opportunity because they see it
mhm,
as catastrophic,
mm,
right? It's not about the work and being able to learn from those things and giving other people the opportunity to do it. And then leaving it across to other people. Now we're not delegating because we believe that nobody else can do it well enough. So I'm just going to take it on. But nothing ever feels good enough. And so that's the difference, right? When we start looking at that perfectionism, it's about the self protection and nothing ever is good enough. Looking for quality because we're always focusing on threat. What is the potential threat? And so we can never actually savor and enjoy what's sort of good. And we
mhm,
start to fuse our identity with that perfectionism, right?
mhm,
So it becomes a real problem when we start looking at that. It's not about the high standards for the work but the thing with perfectionists is they get into this contextual thinking, which is
mhm,
very narrowing. So a contextual thinker is someone where I have to have perfect conditions. So a procedural thinker, though, has flexibility. They can think flexibly. And so we start expanding our thinking, right? And we can problem solve. So the contextual thinker is just very narrow focused. And that's kind
mhm,
of limiting in our performance, anyways. And I do find people who are brilliant, like even children, prodigies, they become perfectionists because they are hearing these messages about how smart
mhm,
they are and how incredible they are, or whatever it
mhm.
is. But they grow up to be low average adults because they're never willing to step out of their comfort zone. They're always sticking within what they know that they can do perfectly.